Hey guys, again with the current situation, I thought I would kind of vent a little. So if you don't want to see it, you can click off now. If not, you can stay and look forward to some of my opinions on the current situation. As you might be aware, I am a UK citizen. There are four countries within the UK: Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. Um, and each of them are taking individual steps to kind of get themselves out of the lockdown. I'm not so fussed in the point of view of Northern Ireland because, unlike the other three countries which are joined as an island, Northern Ireland is kind of split off from the mainland, the UK. Therefore, there is kind of that sea border, which means worst case scenario, if they decide to go out of lockdown earlier than we do, we're able to put measures in place to kind of, for our own safety, kind of have them blocked off. My concerns are mainly to do with the within the UK Parliament, you have the Scottish Parliament, you've got the Welsh Parliament, you've got the Northern Irish, and you've got the Welsh Assembly. Each of these parliaments have powers that some of the powers are joined and are based centrally within Westminster, where legislation is passed, and in other cases, aspects such as health and education are up to the individual nations to decide. Health being one of those, which is a key one within the other countries. My concern about this is that we're not looking at it from a combined UK perspective. Rather, each country is kind of taking its own decisions. We are still taking, though we've got a total death count that happens daily, we get usually notified somewhere about 4 or 5 o'clock when they do the daily briefing. Some of the nations do it a little bit earlier. Scotland has, I've seen in occasions, been able to kind of broadcast their death rates quite a few hours before that, like 12, 1 o'clock. And the same with Wales and Northern Ireland. My biggest concern is that if they start doing this and going in a different path to easing lockdown measures, is that that means they're going to be able to kind of come into England in the same way that they don't want us moving out there. There's this whole argument to do with people who have second homes, because if you're not from the UK, there are areas of England, especially the capital and even places such as Bournemouth, that are incredibly expensive. And so people who tend to have a house in these places can sometimes have second homes in other areas which are cheaper. Areas such as in Wales are warning, do not come to second homes there because you risk spreading it to their local population, and they won't be able to, with their healthcare system, they won't be able to look after their own plus the English or plus anyone else who's bought up second homes there. This is why this is a bit of concern the other way for me being English. My concern is that if they're released too early, they could be trying to get across the border, whereas we're in lockdown and restrictions. There's always the issue that they could then spread it the other way as well. My biggest fear is that because it's not being looked at as a nation, as a national issue, some parts are, some parts aren't, that we're each going to take our own direction, and that regardless of this being whichever country, they're going to get kind of stuck. Someone is going to be made to suffer for the early reactions of a different government. The lady you see on the right-hand side of the screen is a woman known as Nicola Sturgeon. She is the First Minister, so she is basically the Prime Minister for Scotland. I don't necessarily agree with what she wants to do. If you've ever heard of indie ref, it's the idea that they kind of want to be separate from the rest of the UK. I don't necessarily see this as a good thing. And essentially, whilst at the moment she's not saying that there's going to be any immediate ease to lockdown, these hints aren't particularly helpful, especially from the UK government's point of view. Making comments that counteract what they are trying to do only leads to more confusion. People then start flouting the rules more because they say, oh, well, I'm an exception for this, I'm an exception for that. This is a fear I've had. I've got two parents that are unfortunately in the high risk category, and the last thing I want to do is for any of them to get ill with this, because whilst any age can pick up the disease, the most likely to die, unfortunately, my dad is in that category. And with other issues, means it's a situation that I can't really afford. I would ask that the UK government as a whole takes this assessment rather than to do what Europe is doing and is going individually by country. I noticed that there are lockdown easing within places such as Austria, whereas countries such as France have tightened their lockdown to the point where they won't even entertain it until at least, I think it was mid-May. I think France was mid-May. Someone correct me if that's wrong. And I think that is the kind of wrong way to go about it. If that has to happen, then we as a country just have to introduce a hard border. I'm not saying permanently. I'm saying temporarily until we find the vaccine to deal with this. What do you think of the current ongoing situation? Is this something that you're very concerned about? Have you witnessed people who are trying to travel across the borders and ignoring the public advice to stay at home? Leave your comments down below. Whatever you think, I'm always interested to hear. And don't forget to subscribe if you can.